I could either go on to a late night show to promote my movie or go on to a podcast, and it's possible the podcast is going to be more effective than going on to the late night. Onto the late night shows. So like the shade that a lot of these comics who were rejected by the industry are throwing on it is that it's no longer relevant or it's no longer effective, and the industry has to adjust to what we're doing if they want to now be relevant again. Whereas like, but you're working there, everyone's getting paid. You said there's 3 million viewers. Like what doesn't this guy who has this big podcast understand about
or what's your take on it?
Yeah. But that's the shade. That's
the shade.
Yeah.
My take is that this stuff seems to tap into the fact that in 2022, there is so much stuff out there that anything is diluted compared to what it used to be. We can have a massively successful show and 3 million, 4 million people watch. Johnny Carson used to get 20 million viewers a night.
It was more concentrated.
Saturday Night Live didn't have to compete with all these other shows or comedians popping up on all these other outlets. And so it's just difficult to make a mark. But the other thing which came to mind as you were talking is, how do you define a successful show? I mean, I don't know. It certainly is in a certain sense a mark of the tables turned that Bill Maher is going on Joe Rogan, but Joe Rogan is such an outlier, and the goal isn't always just the bigger the audience, the better the show. I don't think. I came from working at Charlie Rose, which I thought was an excellent show, where I think the audience was like 200,000 people a night, which this is going to get more hits than that. No, so I don't know. It depends how you.
That's really
how you define it. It's but I will say it is really difficult to make a mark in the culture, and if you're working on anything in any medium that people are talking about or that's putting out good work and it's making a mark, all the power to you, because there is so much to wade through and sift through, and it's tough to make a mark. And Judd Apatow has talked about this, how you make a movie, and it's just, it used to have traction, and now it's just, there's so much other stuff.
It's a double-edged sword, because it used to be there were so many gatekeepers, but once the gate was open to you,
now
there was a path to a massive audience. Now the gatekeepers have lost their power, but now it's saturated, and you have to do all the work.
Totally, and
even if
that's
you're
why
a big
it's
name.
important to have quality hosts who are arbiters of culture and give their stamp of what's important, cultural curators, so that even if you've never heard of someone on this show or that show, they're probably interesting in some way because this host is vouching for them by having them on his or her show.
I think some of the shade is also wrapped in the idea that, especially for comedians, the edginess of a comedian matters a lot to other comedians, how much you're pushing something, or are you just kind of making everybody comfortable? And there's especially, and I've been doing more comedy now, so you get this kind of like sense of how it, how comedians rank each other and what the culture of comedy is. And it's ironically, it was like you had once upon a time, it was network TV that was the legacy, and cable TV was the edgy stuff, the Comedy Central stuff, the Daily Show, the Colbert Report.
Exactly.
They were the counterculture. They were saying the edgier things that were stirring people up, while Johnny Carson was just having a guest on and just talking nicely, and he was the buttoned up guy. And it seems like it's funny that Stephen Colbert is one of those people, but just in general, it's evolved now where it's television and internet. As the two things. And some of that shit I think gets thrown to people who are like, are you falling in line with a bigger, because you're part of a massive organization like an ABC or a network where you have to answer for something bigger. And there's different things at stake. There's different people at stake. There's a whole team of people. It's a different, like you said, it's kind of apples and oranges. It's not like
it is apples and
oranges. But
oranges.
there's a tension that's just being fought for everywhere in every way.
Yeah, for sure. And there are always people. I remember being so surprised when I always used to read the art section of the New York Times, and A.O. Scott, the film critic, and wrote great stuff and like really smart, awesome movie reviews. And I remember him once saying that when he started at the New York Times, he was just embarrassed because he came out of this academic tradition and he thought, this is so much like beneath me, almost like I've sold out, which reminds me of some of these, in a different way, these comedians who are edgy and then go work in a more mainstream way. And there's always going to be that chip on your shoulder of am I selling out on the more high-minded, interesting stuff? But the flip side is, if you had never made it into the mainstream, you'd be like, I never really made it, never turned that corner. It seems like an endless push and pull.
Yeah. Ultimately, I always look at it as like everybody's judging each other too much. It's like everyone's just, even to Tim Dillon, I would say everyone's trying to make somebody laugh for a minute.
Yeah,
like,
well,
that's all.
Also,
it's a bit.
There
it's
is
a
also,
bit.
if we're being honest,
and I
don't
agree
you
with
think there's a fair amount of resentment?
Well, that's what I was gonna say. It comes from a place of anger, where
Sort of
he's
like, you didn't get that SNL cast member slot and decline it. You didn't get it.
No, completely.
Anger, but also he's like, I'm selling out more shows than the SNL cast member. So
Right.
I don't know how angry he really is. It's more like, ha ha.
Well, you know what though? Those things can still eat at you because
He's
it
not
almost
getting-
like.
He's not getting his due because he is more relevant than a lot of the SNL sketches. Like
You know how many times I've been just eating marinara sauce saying she got a fucking special?
Yeah.
Yeah, but does it still eat at you? I guess that rejection, or it's sort of like, it defines you still, like you sticking it to them a little bit. Like the people
Yeah,
who
it's like
reject
that, the Rosebud thing or the
Yeah, for sure.
that little thing that's hook and stick in your craw.
Yeah, because he's also really interested in celebrity, and that's a gate that's close to him. He
And it's his-
can't be
yeah.
a mainstream celebrity right now.
But it's his angle too. We talk about Tim Dillon because
Yeah,
we're
he-
fans, and he also like lives that lavish lifestyle,
Like,
but
do you know who
resentfully.
Tim Dillon is? That's
No,
a good
I
question.
don't.
Right, so Tim Dillon is the #1 comedy podcaster on Patreon. He makes like almost $200,000 a month through his podcast. He sells out theaters all over the country. He just did like a 60-show tour or something.
Oh, wow.
He's a huge deal, right? But Neil doesn't know who he is.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's where it comes from. Of like why am I not on Stephen Colbert?
I bet
I'm
most people in my orbit would probably know who he is.
You
I'm
think so?
unrepresentative. I think, yeah.
Yeah, they probably do, but I also think like I would never. I can't even picture him on a late night show like as the guest. Although I don't.
I can.
I haven't seen it though,
Yeah.
which is
You would
weird.
need 2 chairs.
But I do feel like, I don't know, once upon a time it was like the comedian community and the late night community were very much
In the same
simpatico,
corner,
and now
right.
it's like with the ability to build your own audience organically online, there just is a changing of the hierarchy or the
See,
process by
I
which
didn't know
people do that.
That
you
there
know?
was this sort of corner because I think
Yeah, that's a lot.
anybody who
about.
loves comedy should have such a reverence for, if not the hosts themselves, then the art form, because it birthed so many of these culture-changing comedians that
sure.
even if you don't like a specific host, it was that structure out of which came Eddie Murphy, Ellen
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld.
There's a generation of comics now, the younger guys, Andrew Schultz, do you know Andrew Schultz? Tim Dillon, the guys who are dominating in the podcast space, who
And
have
you- and
seemingly circumvented the traditional way in which the comic would be a road comic, then they try to get on a sitcom or comment on an MTV show and be
Right.
funny, or get on a late night spot.
Yeah.
And they're still doing spots, but a lot of them are now talking like, hey, I'm building up this audience on my podcast. I'm selling hard tickets. Do I really need that 7-minute tight
Right.
7 on a late night? And they're asking themselves that. And there's a little bit of resentment, but it's more about like, haha, I guess I don't.
Yeah.
But for the first time, it opens up. They can talk shit about SNL and Jimmy Fallon because they don't need Jimmy Fallon and SNL anymore to have a career. So like for the first time, they can publicly make fun of Jimmy Fallon on stage because like whether or not he invites them on the show for a spot doesn't matter. They
Right.
figured it out without him.
And
So
they're
it's
exploiting that power
interesting.
shift a
Yeah.
lot for entertainment purposes.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
us,
It's-
for our enjoyment, Tim Dillon shits on this stuff, and we all like to hear about it because he's like the anti-Hollywood guy.
Yeah.
And you don't know how serious he is about any of it.
At the same time, he said many times, like, "Give me $20 million a year, I'll do it. I'll do it."
yeah, he's not a.
Like he's funny about it. But
doesn't
there
have
is something.
integrity.
He doesn't have integrity. No integrity.
But he's got a big audience, it sounds